Okay, I've thought about it, and there's a hill I'm prepared to die on. Almost without exception, I'm pretty sure that the PlayStation, the N64 and the Saturn games, the fifth console generation, were just purely in terms of aesthetics. It was a massive step back from the simplistic beauty that the SNES and the Genesis that, to me, when they were well managed, have this sort of timeless quality. And they just need a HD and widescreen swab of paint to restore their glory. There is a reason for this regressive step though. By the end of the 1990s, the industry had rushed full tilt towards fully realised three-dimensional, polygonal environments. It was an inescapable pull that every game designer had to combat with. And while some resisted, the truth was inescapable. 3D games were selling. And the problem was that the Sega Saturn, the Sony PlayStation, the Nintendo 64, well, they had just enough power to create these worlds, but they didn't have the power to animate and populate them. So it's no surprise that the best looking games of this generation are fighting games, where small locations and detailed character models are perfect, or role-playing games where the location changes very slowly, and all of the graphical horsepower can be spent on still locations and animating characters to look really cool in them. The rising new genre on the scene was the first-person shooter, and this was able to dispense of a complex player avatar and just focus on the environment and the action. There are some really good games, but they didn't look pretty. And yeah, I know Mario and Crash Bandicoot, they both showed in 1996 that 3D platformers were not just possible, but they could be done with style. But there was some trepidation in particular about Sonic the Hedgehog's first true foray into the third dimension. Having done amazing work on outdated hardware, Traveller's Tales were asked by Sonic Team to have another crack at the Sonic franchise, and they produced a fully realised racing game. Now, theoretically, you'd think racing would be a good fit for a franchise known for an emphasis on speed. So, while Sonic Team were designing courses based on familiar franchise staple concepts, such as like Green Hill or Casino Night, Traveller's Tales built the game engine and handled all the programming. They bounced up to the next generation console their expertise in programming, and it really shines through. Looking this good and running this smoothly, well, as smooth as 30 frames per second as possible for the time, with no pop-up or glitching or any noticeable bugs or errors. I mean, the character models are simplistic, but they're stylish. Suffice to say that for its time, Sonic R had outstanding graphics, and that for me makes it really unique for that console generation. But what it didn't have is much content. It was designed and developed at rapid speed, and Sonic R's only got 5 tracks and 10 playable characters. A full tour of the game's features can be experienced in less than 20 minutes. And 20 minutes, that is, if the player can get their head around the controls. There are 2 ways to play Sonic R, and the difference between them is striking. Everyone I've ever handed the controller to of this game and suggested that they play, they all run into exactly the same brick wall. The characters almost have tank controls. They turn sluggishly, if at all, and the only way to manoeuvre around corners is to bounce off them strategically. At least that's how it feels at first impression, because when the player becomes comfortable with the drifting controls, at which point the racers career all over the place almost uncontrollably. I mean, I lie, it is controllable, but it's also extremely tense because you know it would just take a millisecond lapse in concentration to lose that control. And this makes the game incredibly playable, but in short bursts. I mean, and after you've memorised some of the course design, there's some fantastic shortcuts. But the game's nail-biting in the fighting the controls every step of the way, rather than what challenge will the race throw at me next way. And although this technically is a race, truthfully you're fighting with your own ability to control your characters, rather than any of the other races at any one point in time. And it really is a shame there wasn't more time to workshop this game, as I think a few extra levels of polish on the controls could have produced one of the best console races ever seen. I mean, for comparison, this game came out less than 6 months after Mario Kart 64, and that game has Nintendo levels of polish. They're famous for it, and it's on a console that arguably has an edge in terms of horsepower over the Saturn. which focuses, Mario Kart 64 focuses on gameplay rather than technical horsepower, and it's become one of the most fondly remembered games in console history. In Mario Kart, the courses are much flatter and simpler than in Sonic are. The drivers are just simple sprites. They're animated to look three-dimensional, but actually they're flat, they're just sprites. And the music is classic beeps and bops rather than this psychedelic 90s dance anthem. On a purely technical level, the Nintendo Classic is a simpler game. It exudes charm, but it's no technical masterclass. But Mario Kart, it controls like a dream. It has pick up and play levels of simplicity, and its ease of access, it leads to multiplayer potential that lengthens its appeal. And Sonic R has complexity on its side, and normally I'd stand up for complexity. Normally I'd say, games should have, the complexity gives them depth and makes them more replayable, but in a racing game, I've never managed to have a successful multiplayer game of this. Either you get the controls, and then you've probably memorised every shortcut in the track, or you don't, and you haven't. And so races tend to either be one-sided with one player dominating the competition, or alternatively, both players just being frustrated and irritated when the game refuses to respond as the players intended to. I do have to applaud it though. This is the first true step into three-dimensional world that Sonic made. However, because once you have a handle on the controls, it looks, sounds and feels exactly like what a 3D Sonic game should be doing. It's got raw ambition and power, and approached in the right mindset, completing this game can be a thrilling experience. From its first step into the market, Sonic was a franchise designed to take risks, to make bold, positive steps. It's like a fully designed open world in this style would not have been possible on the Saturn, not without making far too many compromises. And so perhaps it's for the best that this was the only true original Sonic game on the 5th console generation. With 2 successful collaborations under their belt, Sonic Team had seen glimpses of what worked and what didn't work for translating the blue blur into the 3 dimensions. Momentum is what makes Sonic feel great, but it's also what causes so many issues when it's improperly handled. That sense of speed, it can be thrilling once mastered, but it requires such a steep learning curve to control that it would inevitably put players off. Going forwards, Sonic Team would have to strike a balance to put limitations and controls in place so that the player, who are clearly the weak link in this equation, couldn't ruin their perfect games. And it would be a difficult balance to pull off, but if they could just get it right, then potentially great things were just around the corner.